Remote doesn't work for us. I've heard that sentence more times than I can count. And almost every time, it's the wrong diagnosis. The team isn't failing because of remote. Remote is just where the real problem becomes visible. Distance doesn't create dysfunction. It reveals dysfunction that was already there. Or create conditions where existing weaknesses can no longer be managed informally. That's a very different problem, and it requires a very different solution. Let me clear something up first. Language barriers are almost never the core issue. Teams with different native languages find ways to communicate, especially in technical contexts where terminology is shared. Tooling isn't the issue either. Every team I've worked with had the tools, video calls, task management, documentation platforms. The infrastructure was there. What wasn't there was the discipline to use it consistently and the awareness that consistency matters more in a distributed team than it ever did in a co-located one. But even that is a symptom. The root cause goes deeper. Now, language and cultural differences can be genuine factors. I know both sides of that firsthand. I work in German and Polish on a native level, and it's part of how I approach engineering leadership. But what we are talking about here is a different root cause and one that comes up far more often. What actually breaks distributed teams is invisible. Leadership expectations that were never made explicit, feedback cultures that operate completely differently on each side of the border, different assumptions about how success looks, how failure is handled, how much autonomy is appropriate. Neither side is wrong. They are operating from different defaults that formed over years of working in their own context. I've worked with German and Polish engineering teams in automotive. This is where I saw it most clearly. Not language, not time zones. The friction was in what each side took for granted about the other, and in what nobody had made explicit because it felt obvious from where they were standing. Obvious on one side, invisible on the other. That's not a remote problem, that's a foundation problem. Here's a pattern I've seen in almost every cross-border team that was struggling. Both locations are using the same project management system, formal, documented, everyone has access. But at one location, conversations happen in the hallway, in the kitchen, before and after the official meetings. Tasks get discussed, decisions get made, and because the people in that room all understood, nobody thought to enter it into the system. The task just fell through the cracks. For them, it was clear. It had been discussed. For the colleague at the other location, it never happened. They weren't in that hallway. They weren't in that kitchen, and task management system showed nothing. So when the deadline arrives and the part is missing, the reaction is genuine confusion. Why didn't they do it? The answer, because they didn't know it existed. Informal communication is not the problem. Informal communication is actually good. It lowers barriers, speeds things up, keeps energy in a team. The problem is when informal communication creates blind spots for people who aren't in the room. In a co-located team, that's manageable. In a distributed team, it breaks things. Now, the fix isn't to eliminate informal communication. That would make teams slower and less human. The fix is process discipline, where it matters, specifically for tasks with cross-team dependencies. If something needs to be done and someone remote is involved, it goes into the system. Not because the process demands it, because the person at the other location has no other way to know. And alongside that, awareness. Every project member, whether on-site or remote, needs to be in the loop. The default assumption has to shift from "they probably know" to "have I made sure they know?" That shift doesn't happen through tools. It happens through culture, and culture comes from leadership. The teams that make distributed work function don't adapt one team to the other. They build a shared foundation that doesn't require either team to become something it isn't. Explicit agreements on how information moves, rituals that create connection across locations, not just task coordination, but actual relationship building, because informal communication only travels across distance if there is a relationship underneath it. If your remote team isn't performing, have you actually looked at what's happening on both sides of the table?